and he found his own people in the two sides of the army, his own brothers, cousins and uncles, his own friends, and then he felt very much. He felt awful, and he understood that war was horrible and it leads to destruction, therefore it was a crime. So he said, I don't prefer to fight. Then the spiritual teacher who was with him, then he smiled and questioned, a wonderful new discovery. Is it for the first time you are fighting? You fought many hundreds of battles. You killed many thousands of people in the war. Was it not wonderful that you did not find war as destruction? That was because there were no people who belonged to you in the previous wars. There were no relatives or friends or colleagues involved in the previous wars. So if you have your own people, war is something cruel. If there are other people, war is a duty. So if this were to be your reason to decide, you must be a criminal of a cheap type of mind, pretending to advocate peace. Peace cannot be established by criminal minds who are cheap and motivated. Once again, consider the issue from another point of view and take decisions according to the requirement of the situation and not according to your own personal likes and dislikes. And then started the teaching. So the personal likes and dislikes, understanding and doing, which is more important? Some people say that understanding is more important than doing. Okay, when I understand how to cook, when I do not cook, because understanding is more important than cooking. To understand how to eat is more important when I do not eat, because I have understood how to eat. And if we understand what digestion is, what alimentation is, that's enough. No agriculture, no production, no pamashe. So, a wonderful logic. Therefore, some people argue that doing is more important than understanding. There are two schools of fellows living from the beginning of creation till today, living as two different parties who do not come to the common platform. One group believes that it is more important to understand than to do. Another group believes that it is more important to do something than to understand. But the first group argue it is better not to do some nonsense. You have to understand and do what is right. And which is greater of the two? It was not decided. But one thing is definite. The one who thinks which of these two is important, he thinks and dies, and he is the fool of the first grade. Therefore, you start at some point, be sincere and devotional, you will reach the second point automatically. If you try to understand things properly, you will be able to do things properly. Or if you begin to do things with the help of someone who is experienced, you will have experience with him and you will have a proper understanding of doing. What is important is you start with one end instead of being a speculative philosopher. Be operative. All these speculative fellows are useless. Start at one point. you will reach the other point because the 2 points belong to the same straight line. With this, the teaching started, and there was the discussion of the importance of success and failure, right and wrong, the convenient way of thinking and understanding, trying to do the convenient and trying to avoid things that are not convenient, finally going into a miserable way of living. So convenience and inconvenience should not be the deciding factors. And then the next point that was given in Bhagavad Gita is the difference between what you want to do and what you have to do. We want to do many things which are often not required. So we get involved and we have to spend much life again to mend and stand at the original point. When once we take a step in life, simply because we are interested in doing something, and when that something is not scientifically required in our procedure, we get involved in many things. Suppose a professor like me wants to do some business, because it is very easy to earn big amounts of money by doing business. I have to bring money to do business, and I have to stop my profession of teaching because I want to do business, and I have no experience in doing business. My money is spent away and I will be involved. By the time I realized that it was a mistake, I left my profession and I sold my house, and I am on the streets with my wife and children. And then once again to mend myself, to stand in the same position in which I was previously, it takes at least 2 decades, and sometimes it's not possible at all. So first of all, decide what you have to do and what you want to do, and observe the difference between the two. Understand the zero error of your wonderful instrument which you call your intelligence. You have to eliminate the zero error of the instrument. Otherwise you will go into hell from which you can never return. So eliminate what all you want to do. Let it be replaced by what you have to do. Have a scientific way of approach. And then next step is, why such a zero error exists in our intelligence? Why should I think wrongly and understand wrongly? Why can't I understand what I should do correctly? Why should I want to do some things which are not needed by me? It is what is called the birthplace of mistake. What is the birthplace of mistake? Why do likes and dislikes occur in us? What is the cause? Then it is explained that wherever there is a machine working, there is a wear and tear in the machine, and there is a product which is a refuse which is produced by the action of the machine. And as long as the machine is working, the production of unnecessary products is inevitable, and you have to clean the machine daily, wash off the unnecessary materials produced by the action of the machine, and then lubricate the machine properly, and then put it into action daily. So here is a machine. Without knowing its technical know-how, without undergoing a training under an expert of this machine, everyone is beginning to use his own machine. The result is the machine is misused and disused many times, and the machine is worn out and torn out before time. So there is a science and a technical training which makes us understand this machine and its use. How to purify it daily. Purify the physical parts with physical wash. For example, daily having a shower bath and changing the garments daily. But on the mental plane you should know how to make it a mental wash. On the emotional plane you should know how to wash it emotionally. This is also taught in the Bhagavad Gita. And the whole process is called the Eightfold Yoga Path, which is taught also by Patanjali in his Yoga Sutras. It is called the science of synthesis, the science of oneness, the science of yoga. The real meaning of the word yoga is oneness and synthesis. It is the science which makes you experience your oneness with the body, mind and senses, your emotions, intelligence, and your faculties of the intellectual plane. All the faculties of the human being are the higher existences. All the tissues of the physical body and the organs and the parts, they belong to the physical aspect of his existence. All these things put together should have a oneness and a synthesis. Just as all the hundreds of the petals of a flower, they have their fitness in the flower in such a way that they do not exist in plurality. It is only one flower. In spite of the fact that there are hundreds of petals, the flower is one. And this is what is called the science of yoga. Unfortunately, in the present days, in Occident, the word yoga is used in many ways. If a fellow does 10 or 15 asanas on the physical plane, instead of saying I am doing asanas, he says I am doing yoga. So, the word yoga has its own real meaning different from what we understand. The Bhagavad Gita gives us the science of yoga, which includes the science of emotions, the science of instincts and reflexes, the science of intelligence, the science of doing, thinking and understanding. And then finally the Bhagavad Gita teaches us not only the science of yoga, but also yoga living. That is, application of yoga in practical life, how to apply it to our daily incidents, and then what is it that we gain by doing so. The motives of our action are all removed from our mind, and action that is required is taking place through us. And what we want to do will be totally eliminated. And we stop doing things. And things are being done through us. And instrumentality will be understood by us. If we eat tasty food, we remember that the body requires food. And taste is only a convenience to supply food to the body. And instead of eating for taste, we begin to use taste for eating. That makes all the difference. The same thing, same change takes place in us in matters of food and drink, in matters of rest, work and sleep, in matters of sex. In all these things, a fitness takes place in us. Utility decides the purpose. So, actions are no more motivated, but the need and the significance decides actions. The result is, we stop doing action, and action takes place through us. And convenience or inconvenience are not at all the deciding factors. then we will experience that this vehicle is lived by the Lord of the vehicle, and it is no more lived by the servant of this vehicle. Previously we were living in it as the servants of our desires and tastes. By our desire we are used as a dog carried with a chain, whereas we have our own human way of living, and we are no more led by our desires. We have nothing we want to do. Action takes its own place. Just as the most experienced, best driver of motor car, or the greatest artist or the pilot of an aeroplane, he is speaking to his friend and breaking jokes at him while driving, discussing the most intricate points of the Bhagavad Gita or the Gospels. This is because he is not at all driving. His hands are driving, his feet are driving, his mind is driving, his eyes are driving, and he is not at all driving. Driving is taking place through him, and he is sitting leisurely in the vehicle and discussing Bhagavad Gita and the Gospels with his friend. Automatically, when the direction on the street comes to him, the hand drives the vehicle to the right or left required. He has nothing to think of the driving because he has no driving at all. This is called the end of karma, not the end of action, not the end of activity. The end of action and activity is death, whereas end of karma is the end of the cause and effect chain. Since no causes exist with us, no results or effects exist with us, this is how you live when you follow this spiritual path. This is also taught in the Bhagavad Gita. Many things are taught, and we can go on speaking about Bhagavad Gita for years together. And after the Bhagavad Gita is given to Arjuna, the teacher never asked the fellow to go and fight. I want you to reconsider the whole situation from all these points of view, and then decide for yourself if you want to fight or go home. That is what the world teacher said in the end of the Bhagavad Gita. He never asked the fellow to fight, but he said, if you are fully convinced that it is bad to fight, go home. That was the teaching. And then after some time we have the teaching of Buddha, because evidently there was no betterment of humanity after the teaching of Bhagavad Gita. Humanity remained as before, because already the Kali age started, and there was the teaching of Buddha. Buddha said, your yoga is true, your yoga practice is true, everything is true, but only one thing is true when all these things become true. As long as your intention is compassion, then yoga is true. Otherwise, yoga is to make a trade or business of it. Every fellow can start a little ashram in his house, teach yoga and make his livelihood, earn money and start one more ashram. This is the fate of the sacred science yoga. So Buddha said, yoga is yoga when you do it with compassion. Knowledge is knowledge when you have compassion as the motive of your knowledge. So, first of all, try to understand, if you have a compassion towards humanity or not? Then one fellow questioned him, is there a God in this creation or not? Then Buddha said, suppose there is God, what are you going to do? Suppose there is no God, what are you going to do? It is not going to make any change in you. Therefore, you shut up about the matter. Let God take His own care. First of all, you take care of what you have to do. This was very inconvenient to the humanity, and immediately humanity called him an atheist. And some people conveniently called him a revolutionary. And some people started a religion in his name, and they called it Buddhism. And Buddha was killed with Buddhism. So worship Buddha. You need not follow his path. That is what is called a religion. Krishna was also killed in the same way. Worship Krishna. You need not follow Bhagavad Gita. You can have a nice picture of Krishna in your room. Krishna driving the chariot. That's enough. So Buddhism is enough. Buddha is not necessary. If at all he is necessary, you can have the picture of Buddha in your room. A golden Buddha is more valuable than a bronze Buddha. An ivory Buddha is more weight. So the eye of the humanity was turned towards compassion, and a right attitude to understand what law is was given by Buddha. The wheel of law is revealed to humanity. See how the wheel is going. Water goes up in summer. It takes the form of clouds, and again in rainy season it comes down. See how the seed is made to germinate. See how the cycle of water is going on in the form of the activity of the year. This is what Krishna described in Bhagavad Gita. And Buddha said, see how nature is manifesting its law in the form of a wheel rotating. See how sunrise and sunsets occur automatically. See how flame burns from below upwards and water flow from above downwards. How sugar is sweet and salt is saltish. Nature has its own way of functioning in the form of the properties of matter and properties of mind, properties of the solar system and the planets, properties of time and space. This is called the cycle of law, and you are in the midst of it. Rectify your instrument, your mind, reasoning, thought, etc. Understand that you have a discriminating faculty in you. It is called buddhi, and try to take refuge in it, and you will know the Buddha in you. Buddha means the enlightened one. Buddhi means the discriminating factor or the creative will. So with the light of this, you try to understand the law that is eternal. Try to follow it. Make yourself fit to follow it. Purify yourself with the process given by the ancestors, and have compassion as the motive of all your action. And let the suffering humanity have your hand on their shoulder. You give yourself up permanently for those who are suffering, and instead of expecting someone to lift you up, try to give your hand and lift up someone who is suffering. You are automatically lifted. So towards this end, Buddha tried to open the eye of humanity. Humanity remained the same. So once again there is the birth of another master, whom we call the Grandmaster Pythagoras. In the morning classes, we are knowing things in detail, how he gave the same ancient wisdom in his own way, how he tried to galvanize humanity into the virtues once again, how he tried to bring out the light of the soul of humanity. And people enjoyed his conferences, but they kept themselves at a distance from him because they feared his discipline. And nobody was ready to follow the discipline of Pythagoras. And he had to search for disciples. He had to pay for the expenses of the disciples to learn from him. And though he was honored and worshipped and accepted as the light of the Lord, people stood at a distance. And the closest of his disciples himself expressed a sentence about him, that his wisdom is happier than his presence. The disciple said, sunlight is happy and than the presence of sun. We can enjoy the light of the sunlight, but we can't look at this sun. That is what his closest disciple expressed about Pythagoras. And once again, humanity remained the same. And then the Christ came down, and he has made the greatest of the sacrifices. And once again he is crucified, not upon the cross, but upon the religion called Christianity. It is enough if we are Christians. We need not follow Christ. So the same story once again. Even though he lost himself on the cross, the success belongs to humanity, because humanity remained the same even after Christ. And the coming down of Christ proved a thorough failure during the present 2000 years. Humanity went down into immorality and wars and politics and religion. This is the history of humanity during the present 2000 years after the advent of Christ. And Christ gave us the path of purification. Once again he gave the same teachings, because he is the same light who came down again. If you read the Bhagavad Gita and the Gospel, you will find the same teaching and the same light giving the teaching, but with greater force and greater candle power and illumination, because the sacrifice is greater. It is the greatest because no one can have a greater sacrifice. If he got himself crucified for humanity, if anyone wants to do a greater sacrifice, what is it that he can do? So there is no greater sacrifice that can be imagined by humanity. So we once again expect the coming down of the Christ. We write books in the name of Christ and we sell them and make our own money. We shout and cry that Christ is coming, take care. And we predict dates of Christ coming down. And on his behalf, poor Christ, we promise that he speaks in the television. The Christ is helpless, because we promise on his behalf. And if we fail, we say he failed. So let us not be foolish to promise on his behalf. Let him come down again. 5,000 years ago he said, whenever there is lawlessness among humanity, whenever there is a total destruction, whenever misbehavior predominates, I come down to earth once again.